Good evening. Welcome to the RSU5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, September 28th, 2022, and we're in the Freeport High School Library. We have a few board members that aren't able to be with us this evening, Susanna Hancock and Jen Galetta, and our new student rep, Tegan Davenport. Congratulations on your election to the board, but she had a prior engagement for this evening. So we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes of the September 14th, 2022 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Maddie, thank you. Beth, second. All those in favor? Great, thank you. Adjustments to the agenda?
I have a couple this evening. Under 11 Policy Review A, we're going to remove that for this evening. And under 14, I'd like to add a 14A personnel because I have some information to share about a teacher that we would like to hire. And we do not have a student rep report this evening, and that is it.
All right, so then we will move on to 6B, which is good news from the Morse Street School. Julie Nickerson.
To put it on. Oh no, there we go. We just get closer. So my very short good news from Moore Street is not as much fun without the photos of small smiley children that I was going to share with you. So one of the things I was thinking as I was preparing good news is when things feel hard, which our staffing shortage at Moore Street this year has definitely been a challenge. I try and look for the small shiny lights. And so I was going to just share with you some snippets of really fun and engaging things that children are doing across our school. And so I'm going to talk through the pictures I would have shared, and maybe I can send them to you afterwards so you can see, because they're too cute to be missed. So in pre-K, I have this picture of two boys looking at this projected image of a spider that they had found outside, and it just like really illustrates the curiosity that our students come with. And one of the things I always tell teachers at our school is like our job is to instill a love of learning and maintain the curiosity they come with, so that we can set that foundation for the other learning and and the hard work that we expect children to do as they leave us. And so part of that is to see themselves as readers, even if they can't read the words, and to see themselves as writers, even if they can't write those letters and sounds yet. And so there are definitely places in school where those things are already happening. I had a picture of a whole class of kindergartners who were told just because they're reading, they're reading the pictures, which makes them a reader, and the awe around, I am? Yeah, you are, so there are those things that are happening across our school in different settings. So writers, second grade writers are already digging in and thinking about their small moments, which is where we really tackle elaboration and really thinking about detail in their stories and try and hone them in on one topic. If you've spent any time with 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, the meandering stories kind of take a while. So that's when we really try and hone in on staying focused on a topic. And then I had a picture of some of our professional learning in action from last year. We did a book study around kind of embedding some of the science of reading in our practice, in what we're doing in our classrooms. And there was pictures of that learning in action this year as a transfer. And one last thing, I had a note from a second grader this week that I'll just read it to you. So, dear Mrs. Nickerson, I think we should have a second grade lunch bunch book club because kids who want to read can have more reading time. Thank you. So I have to have another job to figure out, but we will figure it out for sure. So there's definitely some great things happening already, and children learning and back to routines and expectations.
Thank you, Julie. And I think the idea of during hard times trying to find the tiny bright lights is something we can all try and put into action. So thank you for that. We have a public comment period. I don't know if anyone found us in the library. All right, so we will move on to the report from the superintendent.
Last time I shared some information with the board about a lot of vacancies we have, so I'm coming back to tell you where we are with some of these. For our bus driver openings, I'm happy to report we hired an additional bus driver who is starting soon. And we also have an additional substitute bus driver that's going to help us out. We're also looking at new ways to approach some of our positions that we have, because some of them are combined positions. For example, custodian bus driver or van driver custodian, and we're dividing some of those positions out, thinking that there might be somebody who would love to be a custodian but they don't want to drive a bus. So we're looking at that a different way to see if we can get another batch of folks for that. Custodians, we've hired an additional custodian. In addition, all the custodial hours that were used to clean the central office have been moved out to the schools, and we're taking care of our own office ourselves. Ed techs, we have an additional ed tech and special education, and I'm really pleased this evening that I'm going to be sharing, you will be sharing a nomination for consideration for the board to help fill a void at Moore Street. We have a special education teacher that will be coming on board, we hope. And to let you know, Dr. Sellers has it for a 6-week period. She's looked with our whole administrative team, could we shift some folks to support Moore Street for a bit so that they can do some additional planning. So starting this week, there are additional folks there to make sure children are receiving their services. So I certainly appreciate there was a lot of good thinking on our team. How could we support all our kids, regardless of what school they were at? And we've also, sometimes when you fill a void, you create another. So, for example, we have 2 ed techs that are filling some long-term sub positions. So then there's another void there. And we're always looking if we have, depending on students' needs on IEPs, sometimes that requires some additional support as well. So we're scratching the surface to make some progress, but still more work to do there. And I did hear, I think we have a lead on another ed tech from Moore Street School that Julie's shaking her head at, that I heard today, that's another possibility. So we're still working. We're shaking the tree as hard as we can, reaching out to families that might say, I can do some support for part-time just to fill that void. Other efforts for hiring, we did send out communication last week to all our staff members and said, is there somebody there who would like to pick up some extra hours in the evening, even a couple hours, helping particularly with custodian efforts. And we're beginning to see a little bit of response from that, more to follow on that, particularly folks who are in their own building they want to help. And for example, we had one employee that said, I'm looking for a down payment on a house. This is a great opportunity for me to get some extra hours. We're also looking at other ways to continue to advertise, to get the word out, because not everybody, particularly hourly employees, are looking on serving schools or even on our website. So we're looking at Help Wanted, Southern Maine Help Wanted. We're looking at Indeed, other media avenues for that. And also we had a discussion this week that let's try the local paper, because some of those folks might just be looking there just to see if we can get a bigger pool. Ashley Rand, our human resource coordinator, has been attending hiring events. There's one in Brunswick tomorrow and in October in Lewiston, so she's going out to those areas as well. And she was in Augusta in August for a hiring fair for veterans. So we're looking everywhere we can to see who might need some work and would like to join our team. The last thing we're doing is we're looking at the possibility of getting some signage out in each of our communities, because if, for example, if you're a Pownell resident and you see a sign out in Pownell, you might not necessarily see thing on this end or on the Durham end, but that might spark an interest that, hey, I'm looking for some work. The tricky part for us is we got to contact all the communities to see what's allowed in each. I think it's a little bit different what signage you can put in the community. So those are things that we're looking at for that. So any questions in terms of the vacancies right now? That's kind of where we're at.
I don't have any questions, but I want to thank all of you for thinking outside the box and really trying to find alternative ways of hiring people and filling the positions. So thank you.
And if I may, one other thing that I may share with the board that's not vacancies, but I know it's on everyone's mind. So I think it's important that I certainly our community is still coming together, and through grief, with the news of the passing of one of our own high school students, and we also had an alumni that was killed over the weekend. Our thoughts are with both of these families at this time. We're doing a lot of supports here for our kids at the high school. We have therapy dogs in. There's been lovely, the outpouring from our neighboring communities. And I think even as far south as York now, we have some counselors coming up just to give us some extra safe places for kids to land. So those things are happening. And there's we've identified some small areas that are a good place for kids to come. And I want to commend Principal Gulko and Assistant Principal Mellon, the support team here and our entire staff for in their own grief, really embracing our kids and taking care of them. And also certainly for our staff and principals at our other schools that are affected by this. And we will continue to work through this. We had we've reached out to NAMI from Maine, and we had a professional in to work with our staff here on how to work with kids and work through their own grief. And next week, Principal Gulko will be advertising this. We realize there are parents that need some support that they don't know how with their own grief or to speak with their children. So there will be, NAMI will be coming to 6 o'clock next Wednesday night here at the FPAC to do a presentation for our families for working through grief. And certainly my heart goes out to both of those families at this time.
Thank you, Jean. Okay, so we will move on to number 9 on our agenda, administrator reports, and we'll start with finance. Peggy Brown.
In your packets, you would have seen the August financial statement, and we are in good financial standing for this point in the year. We're nice and early on and can keep a good eye on things. Our audit of FY22 is now underway. Our auditor has been in the office. She actually returns again tomorrow, and she and I are working through many things and looking at many things together. We are starting to even think about prepping for FY24 and that budget process. So trying to come up with new ideas for better reports and things for the different department heads and the administrators for their review. And the Finance Committee met earlier this month, and Beth will be reporting out on that later. So.
Questions for Peggy?
Okay.
Thank you
very much.
Okay, so we will move on to 9B, which is the Moore Street School Goal Review.
Okay, I'll start with a review of last year's goals and then talk through the setting of new ones, or one. So last year we had three goals, which has been a pattern for how we've set our goals at Moore Street. The first goal being our academic growth measurements around reading and math. And these have been multi-year goals for us. And those of you who have been on the board for a long time will know that we were making expected growth and about ready to meet our target. And then COVID hit. And so that kind of shifted our shifted our data considerably. And so, the kind of reflection on this goal is the work continues with the teachers, and all of the things we set out to do is either ongoing or completed at this point. Like what we had planned on doing last year, we were able to complete. The data in this section, definitely showed growth from the previous year. And I think one of the things we've really reflected on is that kindergarten group that were hit in 2020 and lost that spring, that definitely impacted them through their remaining years at Moore Street for sure. On the whole, obviously some, there'll always be outliers and children that handle things differently or have different supports in different places. But on the whole, that group they showed growth for sure. They maintained gains, but not at the rate that we would expect for second graders at that time. And that definitely had impacted our data. Interestingly enough, our kindergarten data in our hybrid year was higher than it's been ever. And then that group was able to maintain that growth as first graders, and now they're our second graders. So I definitely think we're going to see, a rebound trend kind of coming through, for sure. Our second goal was to revisit and strengthen our responsive classroom practices. That's definitely been something that we've worked on as a school community, and making sure everyone feels safe and belong at school so that they can be engaged in their academics. And so with a high staff turnover, over time, we've had to kind of revisit some of that deep learning that we did in those early years and really kind of transformed how we did things. So a lot has stayed, but there was opportunities for staff to be trained who are new and just revisit some of those practices. But that will continue to be ongoing. That's always things we're reinforcing and revisiting. And then our third goal was around increasing our awareness and implement our equity and inclusion practices. And so we anchored that work in a book study so that, we could really share common discussion points and things. And we certainly kind of did that as a staff, but then with the addition of our new mainers in January, we lived kind of the theory and practice pretty quickly. So, our learning had definitely served us well and helped us think about how to accommodate and embrace our new mainers in our classrooms. So that was last year. And I'm just trying to think if there's anything else specific I wanted to talk about. So those are the three goals we worked on. We had completed all the things we set out to, or things continue to be ongoing. One of the things that was new for us last year that definitely helped and supported some students was the ability to see some students outside of the school day who needed extra support. We always wrestle with these students need more or different, but there's only so many hours in the day and we're taking from something else. So it was great to have that opportunity. And we had some insights into, for which profile of students it was more successful for and who it wasn't. But we're going to continue that this year for some students. So, and again, that really relies on parents being able to transport their children and their willingness to want to do that at this point, the way we're set up to do that. Do you have any questions about last year?
Can you remind us what exactly that added time program was? Was that COVID funds that helped fund that, or?
It is, right. My outside of the day tutoring came from my ESSA money, right? Yes. Extended school day. Right. So that will continue into this year. So, and we were able to offer summer tutoring too. For again, we invite a lot of students, and then some families choose to access it and some not. So.
And Julie, do you have any families who said they would really like for their kid to participate, but they're not able to transport?
Not at this time, because we would have tried to figure out a workaround, so we didn't. And actually, some of it ended up working out. If a child happened to stay for aftercare, we would kind of pull them from that, and then it wouldn't have impacted transportation. Similarly, but most of the early children were able to be transported. So yeah, it wasn't an issue based on how we did it last year. But if it presents, we'll certainly try and problem solve. There's definitely, we have connected to some community volunteers who are always offering that kind of support. So, there's ways we can certainly help if it's needed. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this year's goals if there's no more questions. So as we're thinking about this year's goals, so our data points don't change. Those assessments are really the K2 assessments. And so everything we're doing is, towards student growth. So the data points will still be there. And we're obviously working towards all students growing and at least a year. And for some, we're hoping for catch-up growth too. But for this year, it felt appropriate to have one really meaty goal that encompasses many aspects of the work we do. And what has been very apparent for us, and is the reality that we're living, is that we have different types of students in front of us than we've had. And so, we can't continue to work the way we've been working. We need to do some new learning so that we can ensure that all learners grow. So our goal is around effectively differentiating our Tier 1 instruction in all areas in order for all students to meet expected academic growth. And so it's not that we haven't been differentiating for students. That's the work we do, meeting students where they're at. But we certainly have language learners that we haven't had to accommodate for before. And we have a changing population within our special ed population that are presenting in a way that we just have to change how we're working in order to make sure all students are learning in our classrooms. So, that is kind of the crux of our learning this year. And so I've broken it down into Tier 1 instruction, the goals that we'll have and what we'll be focusing on primarily with our classroom teachers. And then how our response to intervention work will dovetail into that, how our multilingual learners and the work we're doing with our ASOL teachers and classroom teachers will dovetail under that too. And that's definitely an area we'll be seeking out new opportunities for professional development for myself as well as teachers. And then our social, emotional, and behavioral support will continue to strengthen that work. Some things, we started some of these things last year. We had certainly had a couple of sessions with our consulting BCBA who helped all teachers think about how we respond to behavior in different ways. That was really helpful. And then we have this whole section around, how our special ed team will be able to partner with classroom teachers to support the different learners in the classroom. We now have a number of students who are using AAC communication devices. And so there's some need for work to how do we embrace that in our classrooms? How do all students learn and understand how to communicate with our students who have devices? So there's been some really good opportunities for learning that we now kind of need to expand in more classrooms than maybe just one, which has been the case in years past.
Quick question. In addition to the new ELL learners, do we also have a higher number of special ed students at Moore Street this year?
I don't have the numbers to recall. It's probably a few more, but the difference is the kind of profile of the learner. There's definitely more students with more complex needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is the AAC device that you mentioned?
Okay, I'm not I don't know what.
Well,
what
it's
it
okay if you
stands
don't know
but
exactly what it stands for, but yeah.
basically, students who can't communicate verbally have an iPad where they are able to communicate that by tapping buttons, and it speaks for them. I don't know what the
Thank you.
acronym
Yeah.
stands for. Sorry, I should have thought about that.
No worries. That's okay. Thank you.
So that's not an ELL student tool. That's for others. Okay.
Yeah.
I misunderstood. So
Although I
that
was
addressed the question.
thinking about how we could potentially use the idea behind that. I mean, I'm not so those students tend to use an iPad and there's particular software that they use, but a lower tech version that we usually start kind of in pre-K is way more like a picture board. And I'm like, oh, how can we use that to help our language learners for sure? So I'm already kind of thinking that way. Oh, it's augmentative and alternative communication device. Thank you. You're welcome.
How many interpreters do you have on a regular basis for the English learners? And are their needs being met? Are they able to keep up with what's being taught around them?
So we don't have any interpreters at school.
Right. So the interpreters that we have is on a contracted basis, and that's generally when we're meeting with parents. For example, when we do registrations, they go with us to the hotels. If there's a meeting at school, sometimes those folks will come to school to help interpret for the family there. But there's no actually interpreters at school. There are teachers, ESOL teachers, that are supporting those kids.
And we use Google Translate as well as we can. There's some fun conversations that come out through that. Yes.
I was going to say, I can't tell if Colin's putting his hand up and down or.
It's now become a thing in my college classroom that when students are waving their hands, I'm like, is this a school board question or you actually have a thing to say? Thank you for this. I have a question about how, if at all, the new early intervention team sort of integrates with this particular goal for this year. If you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so essentially they will be supporting, our pre-K classrooms so this work that is kind of listed here also applies to them. So they land under, we're trying to kind of have them be very much part of our pre-K team. And so in a way that feels different across the rest of the school. Like we kind of have a special ed teacher with their own classroom and students kind of go between the two, or whereas with the pre-K early intervention team, their home base essentially will be the pre-K classrooms, and they're very much integrated in supporting that differentiation work, mostly because of the nature of pre-K, right? It's very much more fluid than the rest of our classrooms are, and it allows for the fluidity of having multiple adults working with children at the same time. Currently, though, we are using that team to support the Moore Street gaps.
Other questions for Julie? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so board comments and committee reports, board information exchange and agenda requests. In case anyone's come up with any ideas in the last month they want to talk about. Yeah, Maddie.
I don't have a new idea. I just didn't, wow, it's loud, didn't have my mouth ready to comment after Jean's update. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing for our staff and our students and our community. And I want the staff to know how much we care about them and what a huge role we know they fill in taking care of such a large part of our community. And I want to ask that they really attend to their own self-care and know that the community is supportive of them as well. If you need anything, reach out to a friend, go for a walk. Just take care of yourselves, please, and we appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Well said, Maddie. Mara?
I agree. Thank you, Maddie. So recently there was a meeting of the MSBA board in Augusta, and we also had a regional meeting, which Colin was able to attend. It was great to have some company from RSU5 as our delegate. Most of what we talked about was the resolutions that we'll go over later tonight, but it's always interesting to have an opportunity to hear about what's going on in school boards around the rest of the state and then the rest of our region. And a few things that folks shared are, book challenges and curriculum challenges that are coming up around the state and how their districts are handling them. Some different ways that they handle public comment periods, which I could probably share with you, Michelle and Beth. So it's always interesting to hear different approaches that different school districts have. Some folks mentioned a school-based health center being really helpful during the pandemic. They are able to offer students counseling and medical care so parents don't have to pull them out of school. I thought that sounded like a really interesting concept that some other school districts have. And in October, MSSA, the Superintendent Association, is having a discussion about coordinating plans with law enforcement, the comprehensive emergency and safety plans, I guess, that we have that have to be reviewed every year. And I guess there are a lot of discrepancies, so that's something that MSSA wants to give attention to. I believe that came up a little bit in our safety presentation about the importance of coordinating with local law enforcement. So there'll be some resources coming. And MSBA also has some resources coming for new school board chair training and new school board member training that we should all get via email. And I have some other resources that I can pass along as well. And the fall conference is coming up, which I think Michelle will talk about. And I think that's about it.
Thank you. Other comments for agenda requests? Okay, so we will move on to committee reports, and we'll start with finance. Beth.
Yes, so Finance Committee met September 14th, and unfortunately we were missing Mara, but we'll get her next time, hopefully. But she missed out because she probably did not want to become chair of the Finance Committee. No, just kidding. So
considered just nominating and letting you win.
But Peggy takes great minutes, so everybody, I'm sure, has read the minutes, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We, as the Finance Committee, were doing a great job getting in and signing the warrants before the summer, and then we kind of slacked off over the summer, so Peggy was kind enough to bring them all, and we signed everything and took care of that. And the goal this year is not to need the audit extension, and so hopefully that will be achieved. And Peggy's also been working, there's been some difficulties with the software and still going back and forth with Tyler to resolve the issues. And she's still working on a strategy to decrease the printing costs throughout the year, which is amazing. And let's see, the other highlight I would say would property and casualty insurance came in 4% over budget, which we had already increased, like 20%? And then it came in above that. So that was surprising. And yeah, so then we elected the Finance Committee chair. And since Michelle nominated me very quickly, I decided to take it instead of nominating her back and being at a stalemate. one vote away. So that was it. And then also we discussed, which you guys know about because we talked about last time, the presentation around how the cost sharing works at the moment and such. So, and that's it. I'll take any questions if anybody has any. Polly?
Thank you. I have a very quick question. That 4% over budget for the insurance, what does that translate into in dollar terms?
We're going to look at Peggy for that.
So the bill came in at $186,455. So as Beth just mentioned, it was 4% over what we had anticipated. So we're going to be reaching out to them as well because we had submitted some credit opportunities that we had, submitted. So we want to make sure that those were recognized in the fee. So
Okay, and then after we hopefully get some credits from them, the remaining amount that is over budget, we will pay how?
correct. And we thought that the credits would have already been recognized in that because we had submitted that back when it was asked for. So we want to ask that question to see if they did recognize our credits. And we are just seeking other areas on our lines in order to absorb that for this year. And see what next year brings and what percentage we'll want to anticipate.
It's about $7,000 more than we had anticipated, so it's not a huge dollar
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah.
So the 186 was the total bill, not just the over budget.
Yes.
Okay,
I am so sorry.
thank you.
I was not
Because
clear.
I thought
to make up.
that
I
is
am
a
so
lot
sorry.
of money. Where is
yes,
that coming
that's
from?
Much
Okay.
more than the 4%. Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes. So sorry.
I can sleep tonight.
Just a update, I think that cost sharing is on the schedule for the second meeting in October. Does that sound right?
I thought it was November.
Okay.
No?
I
I
hope-
think it's November because we have to add another meeting in to get that
Okay,
presentation.
perfect,
together, so.
because I'm not going to be here on the 26th of October, so you really would be answering all the questions. So if we can move it to November, that would be great.
All right.
That was
we'll-
what I was going to
we'll
ask,
check
so
on that.
hopefully that is in fact already scheduled for November.
We did discuss November so that the new board members
That is
would
exactly
be
right.
present for that.
Thank you. That was very wise of us.
Cynthia's saying November. She has November 30th.
Oh, really? The end of November. Even better. I just had this, like, one of those things you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, oh my God, am I gone on that meeting? Okay, perfect. Any other questions on finance update for Beth? Great, thank you. All right, so next is policy.
So we met and we spent our whole meeting discussing the policy that we were going to bring to you tonight. And thank you for making the decision to not discuss that policy tonight. It seems a little too difficult to do in this moment. So we'll be bringing that to you when we have next policy review, which I don't remember when that is. And I'm the new chair. Yay me. And I don't think I have anything else to say, do I? I think that's pretty much it.
Candy's doing the happy dance over there. We appreciate your tenure as the chair on that board, Candy. You're not getting off that committee. All right, just making sure. All right, thank you. And then I think that was it for committee reports, probably because other committees haven't really met yet, right? I know you guys have strategic communications coming up this week, right? So probably hear from some more folks, in our later meetings from those other committees as they meet. Okay, so we're going to bypass policy for this evening, and we don't have any unfinished business. So we'll move on to the discussion of the MSBA 2022 proposed resolutions. And in your folders, you'll find a newer version of the proposals. So they're both white with yellow, but the newer one says revised at the top, and then there's an added blue in there. And so basically, and Maura can certainly hop in and correct me. So the yellow and the sort of gray strike throughs were the original recommended changes to existing resolutions. And then, so yellow was add, and then obviously strike through was remove. And then the teal color, the blue color, was really changes that were recommended after the regional meetings met. So based on the input from the folks like Mara and Colin and all the other folks that joined those regional meetings to discuss the resolutions, these were some doesn't seem to be hugely material, but it's probably some good ideas in there. So I thought if we're going to discuss them, we might as well discuss the most current. But I will throw the caveat out there that at 6 o'clock today, they were meeting to discuss these again. So we don't know if they materially changed them or not, but we didn't want to push it down another meeting. So I thought we could discuss these, how we've historically done these is kind of gone through resolution by resolution. Some of them are pretty minor and pretty straightforward. And as a board, deciding whether we are in favor or not, because how these work for our newer board members is, so these resolutions, there's a delegate assembly of, in each board has a delegate, and these resolutions will be voted on by the delegation. And this really sort of directs the work of the MSMA board for the upcoming year. So how it works is at that delegation, there's discussion, very similar to how we move and discuss and amend and vote on things here, but on a obviously much larger scale. How many delegates, how many districts are there more? Do you know? Pop quiz. A lot, yes. It's very interesting to watch. They used to do it in person at the annual fall conference. They now do it on a Saturday, I think. But they sort of talk through all these things and then vote. So what we do as a board is we go through the resolutions and we vote as a board if we're in favor or not. And so our delegate, Colin, has his sort of marching orders when he goes to that delegation meeting around what we're, whether we're in favor or not of the individual resolutions, and if we want him to potentially propose an amendment or, ask a question or anything like that. So I encourage everyone to make it as complicated as possible for Colin. No. Okay, so that's sort of the baseline of what we're doing here for this tonight. I wonder if it makes sense, since Maura's probably the most comfortable with these, if we have specific questions, or I know she and Colin were both on those meetings, so they might be able to give us a little more background on them. But so we'll start at the top. Administration of medication. You'll see the new ones that start on page 2 and D. They have the rationale for why they're proposing them. The amendments, they don't really tell you why they're changing them, but some of them are kind of straightforward. So basically, this one looks like they're opposing legislation that would limit or prohibit the school's ability to administer medicine in schools. I don't know. It seems like a reasonable adjustment to the resolution. Does anyone see any issues with that one? Everyone okay with that one? All right. So number 2 is around state assessments. This one, to me anyway, seemed probably to be one of the more substantive changes in the resolutions from the prior years. That this, basically saying that to me, it looks like it's expanding the scope of what they're looking to assess in the state assessments, because I think previously it was, language, arts, literacy, math, and science, and now they're adding social studies and civics. I'm not sure what was the driver on that. I don't know if you guys got any background around.
I want to say it was increasing recognition of the importance of these topics.
Was there any discussion around, and I know, they say that the state assessment should be relevant, provide timely feedback, and not consume undue amounts of instructional time. My fear when I read it is that it's just going to increase the testing time, right? Because there's more things they have to test. And then does it, on the flip side, also increase more prep time for the test because there's more things they have to prepare to test? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, or.
I could give a little bit of having lived in this world. social studies used to have a bigger input back in the day, but it took a back seat, and certainly that's one thing that's recognized that is important. Timely feedback is important because by the time we actually get the results to inform instructions that we can support kids, it's too late. They've already moved on. So that's really important. And overall, they really want to look at the overall testing time, because if you always weigh the cow and never feed the cow's never going to grow. So that's, that they're hoping to be overall, even though they're adding the social studies, but overall to increase that time and get that feedback out to staff so that they can make some changes.
Colin?
My recollection, though it we faulty because I was also cooking dinner for my children while I was on this meeting. I think it had to do with the be limited to, because I think that also is the change in the language. It's no longer should be limited to English language arts and literacy, math and science, but it should include English language arts and literacy, math, science, and social studies, civics. So I think there might be something in that of removing a limit, but I don't recall anything more than that. Is that? Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point, right? So before they were saying these are the only three things, and now not only are they adding a fourth, but they're removing the only part, right? So it's at least these four, potentially more, right? Because they don't limit it. Beth?
I just have a question around the state assessments. Obviously, we know the MEAs went away and they have it just crossed out and it just says state assessments. Do we know like what the actual state assessment is, or is it just everybody chooses something different? No. Okay.
So at like last year, it's the MAP assessment, which is the vendors NWEA. And there's a lot of changes that are happening this year with that. So in the fall, it's going to be the MAP. And then in the spring, it's still the same vendor. And it's way too complicated to get into tonight, but it's going to be called the through-year assessment. So, but the vendor is the same, and that will continue at least for the next 3 years.
Don't go anywhere.
Cynthia. Okay. Follow up on that one. Does that mean that we have a rupture in our data between the fall and the spring again?
There's a rupture in the data where comparability for prior years. Yes. And I've been in meetings. I've been in at least 3 or 4 meetings over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and this is all the conversation around this area in the state.
What are other districts saying about that?
Well, there's a lot of concern. Like, are you going to be putting out some common message so that we can communicate to our boards what this means and what it looks like? Because there's such confusion around it.
And the answer was yes.
Well, they've heard it, and they're in different organizations like MCLA, which is Main Curriculum Leaders Association, and other organizations around the state that are meeting and talking about this are sending these forward to the MDOE, and they're receiving them. So
I mean, this is probably an unfair question to ask, but do districts have any sway over the MDOE in just refusing?
We can give feedback. They can choose to act on it or not, or make a different decision.
Okay.
I mean, they'll act on it, but.
All right. And you're giving our feedback to them, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm part of those meetings, and they're developing FAQs, and I'll, this is what you don't want to get into when you don't have enough information, and right, because this is what we're all going to be facing. And so when I was like, okay, the scorecards in January, how am I going to reconfigure that to make it understandable, with the changes? Am I going to create a new section and start fresh? And it's been frustrating, right? Because we've seen this happen over and over again.
Right, and it goes much deeper than the formatting of the information, is that we're not assessing the same thing. So we're starting from scratch again, and we don't know if kids are growing or not in their achievement.
One of the things we're asking is, are we still going to be able to get the data in the same way? Because they're even changing some of the 2/3 of the questions are going to be based on standards, and I don't want to get into it tonight because it's a lot deeper, but and then a third will be in a different way. And are we still going to be able to look at those questions that they're now asking and can we use the RIT scores to show growth? Like, that's what we're really pushing, right? Because then we could have some sort of comparability, but we're not feeling confident that it is going to actually be comparable. So we're pushing and pushing and pushing these questions and trying to get good answers for, because we have the same concerns that you do. We want to be able to show growth and, where we need to put more emphasis and support our students. So.
And I'm not opposed to change if there's a really good reason for it, right? I mean, if they're saying, that there was some kind of flaw in the system and, now we know better, so we're doing better. I mean, that's understandable, but I'd love to know what that is, right? Like, because this is a big disruption. So what's the benefit of changing it,
right,
other than just to change it?
Right.
So that would be interesting in their FAQs if they address that.
Yeah, and as soon as I get more information, I'd be happy to share. But right now it's all over the place. So
yeah, and again, following up on Michelle's comment, if there's a good reason to change it, could it be done gradually in a way that it doesn't create such a big break from the historical data that we have accumulated and that we're using to measure growth?
Right.
Is this something the MSBA would get involved in? Because I'm surprised that we have these things. It's a very important discussion going on here, and it's not reflected in any of the conversations that the delegations will be considering.
That's what I was thinking with all of this going on, and now you're going to add something else to it, right? That was what was in my mind, because I hadn't even heard about the social studies. Like, that's not been, I don't know if you had, Jean, but I had. You had. Okay.
So I've only been here for 5 years, but it seems like these breaks in the data, it's been happening as long as I've been here. And for those of you who've been in education longer, that's consistent throughout time, right? Or
I think years and years ago, and I'm going to look at Cynthia and her now because we're sort of have a similar career path here. Back in the day when the MEA was the booklet, it was 4th and it was 8th, and it was pretty consistent for a long time. I think as we look at more of these electronic means, I think that's a piece of it as well, that things have evolved. I know when we had that with the smarter balance test for a little bit, and we've just gone through these different things. But what I think is important for us to look at is that we do have other measures that Cynthia reports out on that are standard for us, like the F&P, for example. So even if we're looking at this other measure, we got to make sure that the other pieces that we have will allow us to predict that growth and see those improvements. But I think as of late, it seems like it's more within the last, 10 years or so, 10 or 15 years. There's more of a disruption.
Thank you, because it seems to me that if we're going to have different, education is a political football more and more lately. I don't see any signs of that slowing down. And so it seems like this is probably what's going to happen. And it's a darn shame because it ties up so many resources, time and otherwise, that could be better used elsewhere. And so I think we just need to anticipate. This is a larger philosophical question if the MSBA can get involved somehow and help right this ship, that would be great. But as a district, at least, let's just know that that's the way it is. And let's lean on other ways of assessing our students so we're not spending so much time and resources on those things that we can't count on, and we can just, it's a philosophical question, but it's something I'd like us to think about, and let's sort of elevate our thinking, be creative about this, and not be so dependent on something that we know is going to go with the whims of political ideologies.
I just want to remind folks.
That's what I was trying to get.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I was trying to get back to the the resolution, I guess, but to understand, it seems like the revision from 2020, seems like there's a standard resolution that has been in support of these, of the assessments, and now they're being revised in light of the MDOE's decision, if I'm following the logic of this correctly, and this is the MSBA in waiting, not countering it, but saying if you are going to, if the MEAs are going away, new state assessments are coming, we want two things: social studies and civics to be part of it, and any new state assessment should be relevant, provide timely feedback, and not consume undue amounts of instructional time. That is the issue in this resolution. Is that correct?
That's what it seems to be to me.
Okay.
I think,
Given that seems reasonable.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anyone? Yep. Wow.
I don't want to get us off course again, but if you have anything you'd like me to give, either feedback or I think something more like what Maddie was talking about, that would be proposing an entirely new resolution if we wanted to have something meatier that was really tackling that issue. But if we are more just wanting MSBA to get involved in certain policies at the DOE, that's like something different. So we could think about that. And one of the things I forgot to say in my update is they were encouraging us to engage our legislators as well and invite them to school board meetings. So there's a lot of different ways we can go, just putting that out there for folks to think about in terms of how we address issues like this.
Okay. So I'm seeing a general consensus that we're okay with number 2 for the revision. Okay. Legislative mandates, basically the MSBA is urging them not to interfere with the responsibilities of the local boards and requiring educational programs and unfunded mandates. I think we've been beating that drum for a long time, that you can't just, say all these things we have to do and then tell us to figure out how to pay for it and get it done. So, and unless I'm reading that wrong, that's sort of the gist of that one, right?
Yeah, that's right. And there was some discussion of this one because sometimes these unfunded mandates can come in the form of requiring certain curriculum, like teaching about the Holocaust or, African American history. And right now we have that for Indigenous history in Maine. There's already a law on the books for that, and a lot of schools don't follow it. So, so it's a bit challenging because in one sense, these bills get introduced every session, and in another sense, requiring something to be taught without funding it. The MSBA just believes that should be a decision of the local school district.
So I have a question. It says that there are two things that they're changing here. One is that they don't want the state to require any programs. And then in addition to that, separately, they don't want unfunded requirements. I definitely am 100% against unfunded mandates. But as far as occasionally requiring a program, if there's something new that's happening, like DEI, and it's important to require all districts to follow a new standard, I'm not necessarily against that, but I don't want that to be required without funding. So I'm having a problem because these are both on the same resolution.
But that is actually part of it already, right? That resolution already exists, right? So the original resolution was don't mandate required programmings beyond those required by the standards, equal rights and opportunities, right? So that was the existing. I mean, if we're uncomfortable with that piece of it, then I think we were uncomfortable with the original resolution.
Since we're discussing this one, what do we do with that? I mean, in a way, we have a new opportunity to discuss the previous resolution and see whether we still want to support it. But Maura has information for us.
So the thought there is that it shouldn't be the legislature that is doing that. It should be the DOE. So the DOE could still change its standards and require teaching about the Holocaust, but it should go through the policy process in the Department of Education, not from the legislature.
Okay.
I agree.
Then I'm
with
in
that.
favor.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one? All right, so scheduling of career, technical, and education programs. They adjusted, took out secondary and put in CTE. They added guardians. They took out, we feel the goal can be introduced by the advancement of legislation. They took out the allowing flexibility in the scheduling of courses. And then they kept A and B. And then they added C to expand business internships and apprenticeships. I feel like there must have been something behind their desire to strike A. You guys have any insights on that one?
Do you know what it means? A, because I wasn't even able to understand what that means. Flexible in scheduling. I mean, what kind of flexibility are we talking about?
I don't know, like outside the regular school day, or?
Right, is it just a shift within the school day, or is it outside of the school day, or?
Maybe they didn't know either. Maybe that's why they struck it.
Well, I wonder if it might be being more creative with different CTE programs. If you could send to a place that maybe had a program that where you're sending to didn't have, because I think the state sometimes says you go a certain place, like this is where your kids go, because sometimes they're rigid with that. When I read that, that's what I meant, that maybe they're going to be more flexible in where you go. Sometimes.
Can you think of why they would want to strike that, though?
Well, I mean, let's strike, but when provide a greater opportunity for shared funding and decision-making responsibilities within units served by career and technical centers and regions.
Right, so that probably speaks to what you were saying.
So I think
right?
like that's, that speaks more, and I think the one they took out, it's just scheduling courses themselves, which is more limiting. Just when I read it, in my experience with this, I think, I don't know.
I mean, in general, I'm fine with what they're proposing here, but just wasn't sure why they were looking to strike it.
I think when they changed the first sentence from secondary to CTE, that what was in A became repetitive.
Oh, okay. Okay. We just got to give Maura like 30 seconds to read it and she'll find it. Okay. Any issues with that one? I kind of love the idea that they're trying to encourage internships and apprenticeships. I mean, I think that's huge. So, all right. So we're good with 4. 5, alternative certification. So this one seems like it's trying to deal with the struggle of finding teachers and filling positions with a shortage of candidates. Basically, it sounds like they're working to continue the effort to figure out some legislation that would provide some alternative routes to certifying teachers and administrators. So I think they're just sort of fine-tuning a previous one. Anybody see any concerns with that one? I'm going to look to Jean on that one because I'm, as someone who actually has to hire these people that may be certified differently.
Yeah, it's extremely important that they continue to look at other avenues, and we've been able to bring some folks on board because of some other avenues we have, particularly when we're looking at the short of it, and now administrators as well. That is now in our state, we're seeing a lot of people leaving the field. So the more flexible we can be, the better.
Okay.
Can I ask Mara a question?
Of course.
Thank you.
I teed you up as the expert at the beginning.
Mara.
I'm sorry.
Hello, Mara. I remember this spending a great deal of time on this particular resolution, and now in the yellow I can't find anything that we were talking about. I think there was something about like the appropriate and alternative. I think there was a lot of like lingering over that, but that's old language from 1998. So that wasn't. So I'm just trying to remember if there was anything else that we spent a long time talking about that, and that's not reflected here, which is not bad necessarily. I just can't remember all the details of that.
We did indeed. If you flip to the last page, so the meeting that's going on right now, and we'll check my email again. The MSBA is discussing, whether to go with the version that's in this packet or that one that's last there. And that one that's last there actually, I think, is what I proposed, because the language of the other one, they were trying to take the old resolution, and it was about alternative certification when school restructuring happens, not staffing shortages. And they were trying to wedge staffing shortages into it, and the language was just awkward and it didn't make sense. And I said, could you just kind of like rewrite it so that it is clearer? And they said, sure. And I'm going to check my email. But I think they still basically say the same thing. It's just that the language is a little clearer in the second one. I'm not sure which one will be in the final delegate assembly, but personally, I don't have any concerns whether it's one or the other. I think they both accomplish the same intent.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, that was exactly it, and I think it was the language around other. No, it's also there. Never mind. But yes, that one does read better. It's better said. Good. Thank you.
Well, I hope they took yours. All right. Another number 5. Teacher preparation programs. This one's a little longer. They added a bunch and struck a bunch. I don't know what the difference between a commission and a collaborative is, but they changed that in there. Best practices, obviously, and looks like they substituted the standards from the main system of learning results for the Common Core, and then adding the behavioral health piece and the academic issues. And then I see a question mark, so I'm not sure if they were looking to add something more on the classroom management strategies in there somewhere. Is that another one they were talking about tonight, maybe?
The blue definitely would be where, oh yes, yeah, the blue would be what they're talking about tonight, potentially adding that. So I think I'm recalling correctly, and maybe Colin, you can confirm this. So there was a special commission created previously that met to do the things that are crossed out. The commission did its work and now doesn't exist anymore. So they're saying what we want to do is convene a new commission to do these other things.
Okay. The DOE wasn't involved in the last one. That's interesting. Does anybody have any concerns with that? This is one of the ones I'm going to look to Jean for too, like what your thoughts are on that one.
I think it's good the DOE is involved as well. I think that was certainly a miss there. And I certainly think with even what we heard from Julie this evening when she's looking at her goals, that we're seeing kiddos with some additional some trauma, some additional things in their backpack that they carry to school, and anything we can do for new teachers coming in to give them the tools and strategies to help support our kids. I think that is a good idea.
All right. So in favor of that one. So now we're to the deletion. It looks like there's just one. They're looking to delete, and it looks like they're looking to delete it because they believe it's covered in 2 other already existing resolutions around school safety and violence in schools. I'm guessing that it was just considered to be repetitive. Not having those other 2 in front of me, I can't really say whether they cover the same things or not, but I'm going to assume that these people have done their due diligence.
Yeah, I can bring those up and read them to the board or share them with the board. But yeah, I think that, yeah.
All right. So New proposed resolutions for the upcoming year. So school board meeting public comment period. So this one is really around putting some definition around the new public comment law that went into place last year that requires public comment on any subject at a board meeting. Doesn't have to be on the agenda. And this one, it seems like, is looking to specifically define who the public is in terms of who can speak during public comment period. And public is defined as residents or taxpayers of the community served by the school unit, or immediate families of enrolled students, or employees of the school unit. My immediate concern was around the taxpayer piece, because I think that invites a lot of potential corporate input into our meetings. And if you think about who some of the largest taxpayers are, is that appropriate as it relates to our school boards? Beth,
what is the current? How do we do it currently? I mean, what is the difference?
we say residents.
We say residents.
I believe it's.
Okay.
I think it's kind of defined as residents of the district.
There are a lot of people who don't reside but own property in our 3 towns and pay taxes as such. So do we want to say, unless you live in the property that you own in this town, you're not able to speak to us? I'm not sure.
I think typically that's how it works. Yeah, like at our 3-town meeting, you have to reside in the district or be voted on at the beginning of the meeting to speak.
Okay, because say in our town council meetings, if you own property, you can speak. I mean, I understand that there are different standards. I have mixed feelings about not allowing people to speak. They can speak. We can choose to act or not to act on what they say, but I think it's always good to include all the voices.
Colin.
Cynthia, I remember this coming up in a policy committee conversation where my understanding from Cynthia's understanding is that actually there is currently no limit in the RSU5. It's not resident. Anyone may speak. We've been using the example of my 99-year-old grandmother who lives in Bluebell, Pennsylvania. Happy birthday, Grandma Pat. It was her birthday yesterday. But she could come up and speak. There's no limit. There's no limit currently. So it's not resident. It's not
Our public comment.
Public comment.
Yeah, when we first went remote with COVID and we had people that were chiming in, we had multiple people that weren't in this district that were commenting publicly.
Well, I think that was just because we couldn't control who was commenting or not.
Okay, so
I mean, generally,
I think legally we were not allowed to limit it. We were doing a policy and we were trying to limit. We weren't trying to, but that was the language. We were saying, a resident, and then we were told by the lawyers that we weren't allowed to do that.
I thought you were very much. I mean, so why in our annual budget meeting is it very specific? Like our administrators can't even speak unless we vote for them to be able to speak.
Because you're spending money?
No, well, no, they can't vote either way. It's not like they can vote, so they don't have an impact on the budget vote. But they can't even get up and speak in favor or against something.
Maybe Cynthia knows more about this, but I believe that it used to be residents, and then because that law that you referenced, Michelle, passed, and it didn't define public, it just said you have to let members of the public comment at comment periods. As I'm sure some of you have read in the news, there are folks that travel around to school district complaining about the same thing in each district. And so this resolution is an effort to make sure that public is defined and that it can't just be anybody. But I think you're right, Michelle. I think we used to limit it, and the law kind of opened the floodgates.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Lolly?
So, Maureen, Colin, was there a conversation about the possibility of having every speaker, which I think we can still require even currently, that they state where they're from. We always say you need to say your name and where you're from, and we can just change that to you need to state your name and are you a resident of one of these 3 towns, and then we know who we're hearing from. Did that come up?
I don't recall that coming up. My recollection was that there were many other representatives on that call that had experienced much more challenging meetings than we have experienced. So I think my recollection was this was taken as very much a best practice that should be introduced and very necessary in order to Mara, you jump in here with words that are better words to meet the need of these communities of the school boards to actually meet and do their business, because they are not currently able to do so because of the lack of this language.
I don't know, though, because, I mean, when you read the rationale here, right, passed in 2019 does not define public in a consistent manner as is defined. Oh, okay. So they're saying that Title 20A, subsection 22, which includes public as members of the public who reside within the boundaries of the school administrative unit. MSBA thinks that greater latitude should be provided in addition to residents, so have expanded the definition. So this tells me they're trying to widen who can speak. Maddie?
I agree with you, and I would prefer not for taxpayers to be included in this group. I think that's an appropriate concern. So I would strike that, and I would add in B, families and guardians. We need to always keep guardians in mind.
Yeah, no, I agree. Since they made that connection somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I have to push back a little bit. We have a lot of very involved community members who may reside in Florida in the winter, but they're here and they're fundraising for us and they're mentoring for us. And I do know a couple of people who do volunteer in the schools when they're here, but they may be actually residents of Florida because they do go away in the winter. I'm not sure if they meet the qualification to be residents here, but I don't know. I do like what they're trying to do, expand what MSBA is trying to do. I'm fully in favor of.
So with trying to define resident, so we're defining public, but then if you go on and say, because we do have a lot of, half-time residents possibly. So how do we define that then? Because that gets a little sticky.
I think residency is a legal concept. It's where you file your taxes. It's where you are registered to vote. I think that's a little more defined. But it's an interesting question. I don't know if it's really illegal.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I think it's interesting because after having attended this conversation, the feeling I got was not a desire to expand, but was a desire to be very specific about it. Technically, yes, it does expand the words that are on the page, but I think it actually is intended to limit. So I don't know whether that's simply a smart political rhetoric or if I'm missing something, because it does seem from what I came away from that in terms of whether or not we would approve this, what I came away from that conversation thinking was that that the other boards are experiencing incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging situations, and this would facilitate them to be able to more efficiently or at all accomplish their jobs. That was my understanding of what the conversation was that we were having.
Yeah, could I add to that?
Yep.
Trying to look up this section, but not succeeding. So this is just written in a complicated way. If you look at the last two sentences, this kind of describes what they're trying to do by defining public as being limited to the three stated categories. they're referring in the first part, it's kind of confusing, to a different section, subsection. So it's two different sections, 21 and 22, where the other sections defines public as members of the public who reside within the boundaries of the school administrative unit. So that's another section of law. I can try to look it up and tell you what it does, but they're saying they think public being defined as just residents is pretty restrictive. So currently in the law about speaking in a public comment period, public is not defined at all. So they're seeking to define it in that section, and they're seeking to not make it just residents. I hope that makes sense somewhat.
And I think it also says, is proposing that the shall in this statement provide the opportunity for the public as defined below to comment on school and education matters be limited to the three stated categories. This does not say that the invitation could not be offered to members of the public who may be of a different category, i.e. part-time residents of the
Yes,
community.
and I think that was also, thank you. That was also the other point that was being made, but that decision should be left to the school board, to each district. So if a district like ours decided, yes, we want to have it be more than those three categories, that would be our discretion, but it would not be required.
Right.
But the way it's written now, it includes part-time residents, because it says if you're a taxpayer, you can speak, you're a member of the public. So I am in favor with the way it's proposed, the way it's written. I don't have a problem with in A saying residents or taxpayers of the community served. I'm comfortable with that.
I would prefer to take out taxpayers.
Yeah, I agree, Michelle. I think about our seniors who are going to college and trying to decide where they're going to register to vote because it matters to them where their vote is counted. Like it's a right. It's a privilege to be able to come to your community and weigh in on the proceedings. I mean, folks can always email us if they have something to say, but I think we should take note of the districts who are having a really difficult time. And we know that they're very well organized groups who are intent on disrupting school board meetings. And I support these limits.
Because it also, a taxpayer in a community, I'm a taxpayer in Freeport. I pay sales tax in Freeport. You could get really, really tricky. And if someone wanted to come and they didn't own something, like they could make that case. And we meant real estate taxes. Oh, we meant property taxes. Like, I don't know. I think it's residents. They can't vote in the election. They can't, if they don't live here, they can't vote.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to know why. I think I can understand the logic of why taxpayers is there, but I'm curious why MSBA specifically has decided to include that, given what they say later about leaving other decisions up. Like, why has that been added to it? Not that we can get them on the phone right now.
So I have a question. Why are they trying to define in these three categories who is considered public? If then they say, but go ahead and add anyone you want. Then why are we going through this entire exercise?
Well, you can let anyone you want to speak at your meetings, but right now, I guess the question is who defines what the public is, right? So if somebody comes in from Minnesota and wants to come speak, they say, well, I'm part of the public. And right now, we don't have any way to say that they're not. So I think this is trying to put some parameters around it, because I think Mara's right in that section 22. They're basically saying, look, section 22 defines public, but section 21 doesn't. Subsection 21 doesn't. And so this is sort of their way to put some parameters around that, but recognizing, sort of the immediate family guardian of the students and et cetera.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm not going to die on this hill, so I can go either way.
So I guess
I'm going to be here and I can come and speak. And everybody else I know probably too, maybe except a couple. Yeah, but I can go either way.
Okay. Beth.
do you think, I mean, I'm sure that the taxpayers is intended to be property taxpayers, right? So I'm wondering, do you think they would like clarify that instead of just general taxpayers, but put like property taxpayers or something like that? I don't, homeowners, but you could have land and not, yeah. Anyway, it's just a thought. I don't know if that's.
I do.
Oh, I was just going to say Colin's the delegate, so that's why I was. That's why I was pointing. That's why I was. That's why I was pointing at him.
Well, you guys are both so good, so I don't know.
Go off mic to laugh. Yes, I think that proposing something like property tax would make a good amendment, if that's the right word to use for that.
It would be an amendment.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess we need to decide as a board, are we comfortable the way it's written? Are we comfortable or that we want to strike taxpayers altogether? Or the third option, amongst infinite options, I suppose. But the third one we've just discussed is, do we want to specify property taxpayers?
I would support specifying property taxpayers.
I don't want to make this more complicated, but renters do pay property taxes in their rent.
Renters would be residents.
Oh, so they'd be resident.
They would be okay.
So they would be included.
Because they would be living here.
It's
in
just
that
my
property.
it's just my 99-year-old grandmother buying a pack of cigarettes, and then saying I can come speak because I just bought a pack of cigarettes. Don't smoke anymore, Grandma. You can make it to 100.
I hope she watches your meetings. Valerie.
I think we should propose that amendment, and then if people want to vote against that, at least if others vote for it and it passes, it has that amendment in it, possibly. So it doesn't hurt to have that amendment in it. If we're all in agreement that that's a better option than the one that is proposed right now.
Yeah, just from a process, who am I supposed to look at? From a process perspective, if we decided to say yes as a board, we'd like our delegate, which is me, to go and say, can we please add property tax? Is that just me standing up, being lonely, and saying that, and then everybody nodding and?
So
nodding and being like, "That's a nice idea," but like, there's no meat to it, or because everybody else is going to be they're going to have their version of a guy in a sweater, like, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of chaos, right? It's in person or is it on Zoom?
You know what? I think it might be on Zoom.
I think it's Zoom.
That's even worse. So I haven't been a delegate in a Zoom one, but in person, it's literally like our annual budget meeting. Like, people get up, they can ask a question, and then based on the answer, they could be like, all right, I'd like to make an amendment, to specify property taxpayers. Or I'd like to make an amendment to strike taxpayers from the proposed resolution. And if you get a second, you vote on the amendment. It passes. You now vote as a group on the whole amended resolution. And if it fails, don't worry, somebody will figure that part out. Maura will figure that part out. She'll be sitting there. You will be there. The board's there. The MSBA board's there. Yep.
No comment.
Okay, somebody will be there.
Well, yeah, somebody will be there.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just asking this to understand whether this is an exercise in rhetoric and a sort of formality to say we would like this to be the way it is, but we know it's not going to happen.
No, you can 100% make an amendment, and most times the resolutions that pass are amended multiple times sometimes.
And you don't have to say what you're going to vote afterward for the resolution itself. You can just propose the amendment, vote yes for the amendment, and then you can vote against the entire amended resolution if you want to.
Just for fun.
Yeah. But at least
excellent. That sounds
the resolution that passes has your amendment, which is better than the original.
So, I mean, I don't know. I think the best option is to remove taxpayers. A better option is to specify what types of taxpayers, and the least preferable for me is the way it's written now. So I don't know if we want him to get up there and make his amendment stand, what do we want him to say? Maura?
What about your point about the corporations thing? Because the property tax thing doesn't address that.
Right, I know. That's why my best option is that we strike taxpayers.
Do we think residents includes part-time residents? I missed that. I'm sorry.
I don't know if it does, but that's something we could in our policy specifically call out as acceptable.
Okay.
So what's our marching orders for young Colin here?
Then I'm fine with removing taxpayers and then adding it back here on our policy.
So step one is remove taxpayers, and if that fails, then your next amendment is okay. I'd like
Property.
to specify property taxpayers.
No one's gonna like me, guys. I don't know that many people. You know,
You'll be fine.
I'll bring you cookies.
no, that's fine. So there's two things. There's two things. The first is to say, please, can we remove taxpayers? That's the amendment. Then that will be voted upon.
Yes.
When that'll go through.
Well, then you're done, and then you vote on the whole thing. And
But
you're
in the
finished.
very small possibility that it isn't, I say that's great, but here's another idea.
Yeah, like,
And
well,
then
if you're
I
not
propose-
comfortable with that, how
yeah.
about this?
Okay, good, perfect. Sounds great.
So I just want to make sure that the board is okay with that, because there are folks we haven't heard from on this front. So shall we assume that if you aren't stamping your feet, changing your mind, that, yeah.
I guess I feel comfortable letting this grand group do what they're going to do without Colin saying something, and then when we as a group determine what is reasonable public, because we get to do that.
We can't define, we can't
Well, it says-
exclude. We can add more, but we can't exclude once they change the statute.
And I mean, having done it last year on a Zoom, it is fast, and you got to get in there. And if you're cooking, you might miss
Yeah, maybe
your,
don't cook this
you
time.
might miss your opportunity.
Isn't this on Saturday? This is the
it's
Saturday
like,
one, isn't it?
Last year was a Saturday, and I think I was cooking. The pieces went really
Colin,
fast.
the rest of us will feed your family
Okay,
that
great,
night.
yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to, yeah, okay, great. This sounds great. I'm glad that Jill also was cooking. That makes me feel better.
I mean, you got to make the emotion anyway to add guardians. So you're going to add both of those things in one amendment, and off you go. Nobody volunteers for this job twice.
I know, we get you in there for the first year. You're like, no.
No.
No, this is entertaining.
All right. So D, the first D, we supportive with those two minor amendments. Okay. Next one, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. The Maine School Boards Association urges Congress to reauthorize and fully fund the individuals providing 40% reimbursement for locally expended funds for special ed compared to the 14% currently received. I mean, is anybody opposed to that? That one's an easy one. I guess I didn't realize it had sort of lapsed. It's interesting. All right. Free and reduced lunch qualifications urges Congress and the administration to provide poverty level requirements for free and reduced lunch by using the area median income as used by HUD or the national federal poverty level, whichever is higher. They should be established federally while in no way being confused with the Maine's meal plan. So essentially, I think that what this is trying to do is sort of make it a little more relative to the district that you live in an effort to make sure that everybody's getting the services they need relative to where they're living. I couldn't think of any reason to not be in favor of this.
Yeah, I think the other reason is I don't know about our district, but some districts have experienced a big decline in folks filling out the paperwork.
Right. So how does this fix that? I still don't think, because it's just setting what the level is to qualify. But if people don't apply, then we still don't know.
I think there are other ways to identify this, but that is a good question.
currently uses the national federal poverty level to determine eligibility.
My other question is, here it says is to determine eligibility for, where are we? For free and reduced lunch, for the free and reduced lunch program, but we know that now it's universal, so we still call it free and reduced lunch, even though it's used for funding
All
other
sorts of other
programs?
things. Yeah.
Shouldn't they change that name now?
Yes.
It's super confusing.
Right. Everybody gets free lunch.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's just because that has been so ingrained in the sort of psyche of people knowing that's what it's called. I think the fear is that if they changed it, nobody would fill out the form. I don't know. I mean, it's a really good point of when the meals are free anyway, which I'm completely in support of. Like, what's the incentive for people to fill out the form, right? Like the district gets additional funds, right? The title funds are related to that and some other things. I mean, it's really important for us to get the information so we can, in addition to, I think families get a lot of other things other than free lunch that come with it, but they may or may not even know that that's an option, right? The cell phone, the reduced internet, there are other options of services for folks to take advantage of through this program. I don't know. I think it's something on the, I'm not opposed to this, but I think it's something on the federal level. They need to do sort of some marketing rebranding around, like, how do they get people, familiar with what the benefits of filling out this form are, and stop calling it free and reduced lunch.
Changing the name and say what it is that we
Right.
use that information for now.
Yep. But that might be a battle for another day. I mean, unless we want Colin to propose a new resolution to the floor, brand new.
Rename the entire program.
We'll leave it up to you what you call it, Colin. Good luck. All right. So we're okay with that one. All right. Funding for universal school meals for 2021, passed the universal school meals program, which will amend the child nutrition program of 96 and some other ones even older than that. I thought they'd already done this.
The state law. So this would be federal.
Oh, so the state calls on, U.S. Congress to pass the Universal Meals Act?
Mm-hmm.
But, wait, they want to pass the act of 2021, but it's 2022. Is there a new one, or is this just
Lawmakers.
It just takes them a long time. Okay,
No offense, anyone watching.
we love you all equally.
They're so dedicated. Yeah, no, I think you're probably right, Michelle. It just is, what do I want to call it? Not moving forward. So this would be, right now, it's coming out of state money.
Okay, so
And
this
we're-
is requesting the federal government to step in instead of each state doing it themselves. Okay.
Are they actually suggesting or urging Congress to pass a universal law that would cover the entire nation? Or are they saying we are asking the federal government to pay for Maine's law and the costs associated with it?
I'm going to guess the Universal School Meals Program Act of 2021 is probably for the whole country. Yeah.
Could we ask, when these resolutions are written, that if we're communicating with the U.S. Congress, it says U.S. Congress, because it's really confusing. We don't know if this is state or federal, or who are we talking about, for both, for the free reduced lunch qualifications and for the funding for the universal school meals.
So the amendment would be wherever a legislative body is referenced to make clear whether that is federal or state.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not something that needs to be amended and voted on the floor. It might just be a recommendation. I mean, these aren't laws that are going into effect. This is just the resolution they're using, right? So they could, maybe for future reference. Yeah.
Right, and also when it says, and the administration, is that what administration?
Us.
Yeah. Can I just quickly on the? I think that what we're the resolution is supporting to pass the universal school lunch program sort of as it is. It's not the without adversely affecting federal funding formula that may use free or reduced lunch rates is not kind of adding a detail to say we want to make sure it's passed and make sure when it's passed it does not adversely affect the federal funding formula. Does that question make sense to anyone?
No, I think you're right. Like there's the distinction, right? It's not that that program necessarily wouldn't affect it, but they're saying they want them to implement it and make sure it doesn't mess up any of the.
To make.
Is that, I don't know the answer to this question. Is that federal funding formula, like, are they saying similar to, sorry that I'm asking you what they mean, but I'm thinking about how the state uses that data to calculate how much funding they give us, not for meals, but for low SES students.
Yeah, right. Because it says the free and reduced lunch program currently uses no, that's different. The federal poverty level. But I think it is the federal program. And that is what determines what we get for those other services and programs in Title I and II. And
yeah, it just I think that if that's really what they intended, the sentence would read more: the Maine School Board Association calls upon Congress to pass the Universal School Meals Program Act of 2021 without adversely affecting federal funding formula that may use free and reduced lunch rates, period. And then the second sentence would just simply be defining what the act is. So that's where I don't want to get into. Sorry, go back.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, that's a fair question, right? Like, is your intent that, is this what you're trying to say here? That's oftentimes what we send the delegates with. Like, we think this is what they mean. I feel like we're much better prepared this year. One, because Maura's been involved all year, and because you guys were both at that regional meeting where they talked at these events. I mean, usually we kind of get these blind and we're like, I wonder what they mean. And we go, if you mean this, we're good. If you mean that, we are not good. And so the delegate has to go determine, do they mean this or do they mean that? So I think we're a little bit better off. But I mean, if you wanted to ask that clarifying question and be like, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your intent here, they should be able to answer that question for you. And if it is what you expect, I mean, you can suggest they reorder the words. But I think you can, feel confident voting in favor of the resolution.
Okay, so I have the board's permission to be a grammar and syntax.
We love it.
Okay, great.
We're known for it at those meetings. You wouldn't believe what Jill did to him last year. All right, last one. Social Security repeal of government pension offset and windfall elimination provision. I feel like the name of this one is longer than the actual resolution, but the MSBA urges Congress, presumably U.S. Congress, to repeal the windfall elimination provision in the government pension offset of the Social Security Act to ensure the quality pool of teacher candidates are available to be hired so as to meet the needs of students. So clearly this is just, I don't know what this offset and windfall elimination limits. Does our finance person? She was like, oh no, I knew I should have left.
If you have someone who has worked in the public sector for a long, long time and they've paid into Social Security, and it would be a great candidate to be a new teacher for us, they're now under Maine PERS. So then they're not going to get all that Social Security benefit that they already paid in. So in order to get more people in the pool, we don't want to penalize those folks that may have worked in the private sector for a while.
And I feel like we have had a solution to this. Because we have people, because we've hired people that have been Social Security people, and we have a specific, I want to call it a PPO, but that kind of sounds... PLD. I knew it was another acronym for something else. We do have a program for people that allows them to continue to pay into Social Security, right? The other way around? Maine PERS. Okay. Well, okay, so it goes the other way. Why would you need someone to go the other way? We're going to ask you to come to the mic because the people at home can't hear you. Sorry.
We've had a couple of circumstances come up. One that since I've been involved in this, and one prior, someone taking a position that, if, for instance, has been a teacher their whole time and then has taken an administrator role that is not a main PERS role, they have their whole career under main PERS. So then to switch to a Social Security job, so that PLD was an avenue for that particular person to keep paying into main PERS. So to not lose, because the windfall, I don't have all the specifics of the windfall. It's a very confusing thing.
Which is probably why they want them to just repeal it. But
and but there are certain parameters. In fact, I just recently had a candidate asking about that who has done Social Security their whole career and then wanted to have an EdTech role. So an EdTech 1 does not have to pay into main PERS, an EdTech 2 or an EdTech 3 does. So there were a couple of options there. But I instructed that person to actually reach out to main PERS because they are the experts on the windfall. So I personally think that if that is eliminated in someone who's paid into Social Security, like me, for instance, my whole life has been paying into Social Security. A few years ago, I kind of thought, well, what if I got a teaching degree? I mean, a teaching certification. But I'm like, no, but I can't because my whole, 40 years has been under Social Security. So it would prevent me from stepping in as a teacher. And I think a lot of people are faced with that. So
really
if
this
is eliminated, then...
Right. So this basically would eliminate a hurdle it would expand our pool of candidates because there are people who wouldn't necessarily, one, go from teacher to administrator or go from private sector to teacher.
Correct.
That we might want, but because of this potential retirement issue, would choose to seek other employment.
This is the first time I've seen it just reading it in this packet, but I find it very intriguing because it could open our candidate pool.
Right. So with that, why would we not, right? We're trying to be creative in how to increase the candidate pool.
Yes.
I'm sure there was a reason they put that in place at some point, but that's somebody else's problem to figure out. Okay. So we are, I think for the first time, there's two more? No, those are the alternative certification rewrites from that Maura went over earlier, right? Those are the same ones? Yeah.
Sorry, just on that. So Maura, MSBA will include one or the other of the alternative certification language. And we're fine with either of those.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
I think this is the first time we've never voted no on one. So I guess the only question, for the amendment for the first one around the public comment period is, I think the plan is to strike it, and then Plan B is to specify it. Plan C, if those both fail and it goes back to the original, we're still okay with him voting yes on that, right?
Even if it doesn't have the guardians, if they say no to that.
I mean, we can add guardians just like any other, like we can always add people, right? So we just can't take away. So if for whatever reason that one didn't make it in. Okay, I just want to make sure that he's got his flow chart.
So if I
Yes.
fail, I still vote yes and say that sounds great.
You got to fail twice.
3 times. Guardians, possibility 1, possibility 2. Yeah, good.
All right. So, all right. Thank you for that. I appreciate everybody's participation in there. I always laugh when Ginny thinks it's going to take us 20 minutes to do that. All right. Also in your packet is the fall conference, which is the 27th and 28th of October. It's always a Thursday and Friday up in Augusta. If you are interested in going, just please let Ginny know by the 4th, which is next Tuesday. Yeah.
I just want to encourage anybody who hasn't gone to go. It's a fantastic conference, and in person, especially, just such a huge opportunity to learn, but more than that, to really recognize the huge privilege we enjoy in this district and have some compassion for our colleagues across the state. I think it's very important that we attend.
I agree. And even if you've been in the past, I mean, they always are introducing new sessions. I mean, the keynote speaker on the first morning is always very good. This gentleman also looks quite interesting around the Trust Edge leadership. There's a copy of the various sessions that they'll have throughout the day. I'm actually in Baltimore on Thursday, but I may try and sneak into some on Friday. But I highly recommend, folks, if you have the ability to go, just let Ginny know and she'll get you all signed up. All right. So we are up to personnel. So our adjustment to the agenda.
So I have a candidate, a special education teacher, to bring before you this evening. It is Ryan Redka. Ryan has a BA in Fine Arts from the Maryland Institute College of Art, a master's in education from UMO in special education. He has a variety of experience in the realm of working with children with special needs. He's been a senior educational technician 3 at Easter Seals, Maine, an assistant teacher at Odyssey, Children's Odyssey, a lead teacher at Children's Odyssey, and he was in Ed Tech 3 at Moore Street School. As well as this summer, he was a summer school teacher for special education children at Moore Street School. He currently is a special education teacher for CDS as well. And our team would love to welcome him back to RSU5 in this new capacity, in one of we desperately need at Moore Street.
Can I just ask a clarifying? We crossed out and circled an initial. Is it a permanent position or is it a 1-year position?
So it is. It is a 1-year position, however, with our funds. However, I know it's something Dr. Sellers is going to be bringing before the board during budget. And if it cannot be funded through the budget for whatever reason, we're looking at other funding grant opportunities, for example, through the IDEA grant to fund this, because it is definitely a position that is needed. So that's why it was advertised as 1 year. So that's why we want to make sure the board sees it as 1 year, because that's where the funding is. And remember, we have lots of openings. We found some savings there. But it is definitely coming back either through the regular budget or through another avenue, because it's so important for our kids.
I guess that's a good point. So this is a new position. This is not a refilling of an existing person who left.
Correct. And that was when we met at the board retreat, that was because we had so many ed tech positions that were opening that we couldn't fill, that we thought we have another teacher that's going to support the needs in a different way. And they're really looking very hard at all the programming needs there. And can we just think differently, because we just can't get educational technicians. And we still have openings for those folks. So this will absolutely help us with one piece of that puzzle.
Thank you for the reminder that we already saw this once. Lots of information going in and out of this brain. All right. Do I have, I'm sure I have a motion here. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ Ryan Redka as the special education teacher at the Moore Street School for the 22-23 school year, 1 year only? Candy and Maddie, thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor? Great, none opposed. All right. Here we are, public comment. Sure to check people's driver's license for where they live. For tax receipts. I know we're when we actually have to put these things into play, we'll have to figure that out. Anyway, okay. Seeing no public comment this evening, I would take a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA section 405(6)A to discuss a personnel matter. Jill and Mara, thank you. All those in favor? All right. We'll be back.